Sure. It hasn't started on the stream yet. Give it some time to populate, you know. You know how that is. There we go. Now we're live. Alright, bad ass. Alright, so now that I'm live, I'm gonna give it some time to populate. Let me see what I can do here with this. There we go. Now we're live. Alright, bad ass. Perfect. Fuck. Alright, there we go. Sweet. Hey, Wyatt. How's it going, Wyatt? Wyatt in the chat. Cheers, man. Hey, Henry. Henry's in the chat with the big heart. Thank you, sir. Let's give it a couple minutes to let the chat kind of populate before I start. Um, but I guess I'll kind of give my reason why why I wanted to do this stream. Um, so this has nothing to do with it, but while I'm at work, which has nothing to do with my decision to do this stream, but while I'm at work, I usually I'll put some music on, or YouTube videos or audiobooks. But today specifically, I just had music on, and I was actually listening to the exact playlist that I believe is playing over the stream right now. So let me know if you guys can hear the music when I'm not talking. But if not, I'll try and figure that out. But yeah, and it got me thinking about a number of things. Um, one of them being all the different misconceptions and the malignment of the people who fought in the Civil War, especially obviously for the Confederacy. Um, the reasons for this obviously are many and varied. Henry can hear it. Awesome. Um, the reasons why there are so many misconceptions. There's two big ones I think. Um, one is history is written by the victors, right? And without a doubt, obviously the Union won. Um, so they get to write, they get to write history. They get to write, basically everything that happened, or at least get to put their spin on it. So that's one thing, when you're. I learned the same thing in school when I went to school in South Carolina when I learned about it, and I learned the same kind of deal, that the Civil War was completely about slavery, and no other issues really. Um, so I think that's obviously a huge problem, is that people don't go beyond that surface kind of understanding. So it does take some effort on your own part, to kind of get rid of that misconception. Um, and that's where I'm approaching this, is coming from the misconception that the Civil War was about slavery. Um, was it a component? Absolutely. But it was not why the states seceded from the Union in the first place. That's not why that war was started. States' rights, right. Henry's completely correct. It was about states' rights. And of course, the common. I've seen so many lefty memes of, oh, it's about states' rights. Like, states' rights to what? Like, checkmate. Obviously, that's, it's a meme for one. So, there's not usually a lot of thought or context going in there. Yeah, same, Henry. I didn't learn what the truth was until after high school either. Um, but But yeah, so it's more than just like, oh, states' rights. It's more about like the actual main, in my opinion, the main issue was a difference in interpretation of the Constitution, specifically the 10th Amendment and Article 6, I believe. I believe it's Article 6, which states that federal law trumps state law, is Article 6, and 10th Amendment is that any powers not given to the federal government are left up to the state. to decide. And the southern states, the slave states at the time, were, and it wasn't just slavery, right? That the issue was, it was just anything. The federal government was grabbing up more and more and more power for themselves, kind of like they are now, you know. Um, and obviously they saw the same thing that I think the people in, at least our subscribers see. Um, this grab for power, top heavy, top down power, and that's something that we try to avoid, at least in this country. Um, but as is the nature of government, its nature is to grow and become more powerful. That's just how government functions, regardless of how benign it might be, regardless of what intentions, whether they be good or not. It doesn't matter. The power is going to grow. That's just how that works. It's human nature, and it's just the way that government. It's just a natural form of government is to expand. So the South, and this is all, you know, coming from memory. I'm not reading off of something right now. Um, but yeah, so the South saw that the federal government was, continuously getting more and more and more and more power. Smaller the government, the better. Exactly, Wyatt. Exactly. It's always happened in history. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I would say Midget says you can't talk about states' rights and federalization without talking about the Federal Reserve. Well, I can certainly try. Um, I don't really know much about the Federal Reserve or its hand in, especially I don't even know what if it was around during the Civil War. I'm sure it was, but how did Andrew Jackson feel about it? Yeah, he was. I know he was against any kind of you know national bank, which obviously was a wise move, right? Um, you know, but obviously we're well past that point now, right? Obviously, I would like to change that, but that's not really the topic for tonight. I think what we're going to talk about. I don't really want to go through like a timeline, like a history timeline. Yeah, Federal Reserve is a private company. I know. I don't really want to go through like the timeline, the history, battles, even because I mean, first of all, there's a plethora of information out there. I'm not going to share anything with you guys that you guys don't already know. For the most part, I mean, you guys are intelligent people. I don't want to, I don't want to bore you with details. What I kind of want to talk about, like I said before, some of the misconceptions, and I guess just like my thoughts on why they are so maligned. Um, the Confederacy specifically. So what I've done, and I hope this works because it's my first time using it on OBS. So I hope this works. I've got a new screen or a new scene here that I'm going to show you guys some flags. All right. Columbus discovered America in 1492. The lies about history and politics are endless. Yeah, absolutely. Why are you doing this topic if you don't know shit about it? I know I know about the Civil War. I don't know about the Federal Reserve and its you know and its effect on the Civil War. So anyway, here we have. Hopefully, it'll show up on the screen in a second. Let me make sure it does. Let me just make sure it does. As soon as it should be about 15 seconds, 20 seconds, something like that. Before it does, let me take a drink. There we go. So it does work. This is what like the this is obviously what people call the quote unquote Confederate flag. Um, I'm about to get into the reasons in a moment why it's not. Um, that's actually the battle flag of what is it, Northern Virginia, the Army of Northern Virginia. It was popularized obviously during that time, and but it was not the flag of the Confederacy. In fact, the first one is this one here. This was the flag, the first flag of the Confederacy. It's just called the Stars and Bars. So this is what was hanging out of the government buildings of the Confederacy, not the other one. Now, I understand why people might think that this one is, um, because it was like it was used in aspects of the two future Confederate flags, and this would be one of them. In just a moment, let me see what this is. Yeah, not the Confederate flag right here. This is not it. Holy fuck, he learned to screen share. I really didn't though. Uh, that flag means slavery. No, it does not. Right, and that's kind of what I want to talk about right here. I actually don't have the other Confederate flag on here. I fucked up. So anyway, I'm going to show this one at the moment, just because yeah, it's not the Confederate flag. Um, I showed you which one was. Um, I guess I kind of wanted to go on about people, especially people being attacked just for flying this flag. Being called racist and you know pro-slavery. Um, just all this nonsense like that, which really diminishes the reason why these people fought in the first place. That CGP Gray's video on the Confederate flag. Yeah, I'm sure. I see Henry was doing the Kaepernick. Yeah. Anyway, welcome, Cameron. But yeah, so this is, like I said, not the Confederate flag. And I don't know exactly what. Maybe just because it was so prolific during the time that people just assumed that it was. Um, you'd likely see this on the battlefield more than you would, atop of a government building. Uh, I guess it does look better too than the actual Confederate flag. That one kind of sucked. Yeah, destroy all Confederacy statues. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to remember, history, right? Especially history that talks about, minimizing the government and its effect on your life, especially when you're trying to do the opposite. They want to completely bury the real reason for the Civil War, and the only way to do that is to destroy any symbols of the past. Right, that's exactly what I was just saying, right. Um, he who controls the past controls the present, and he controls the present controls the future. Uh, and that's kind of why I want to do this as well. Not that I'm the first one to do this, because obviously I'm not. Plenty of people have done these kind of videos, probably way better than I ever could, because I'm kind of faltering at the moment. So I'll go back to, you know, diluting or diminishing uh, the reasons why people fought for the Confederacy. I mean, and I've said this to people before. It's like, do you really think that some poor Southern farmer is going to fight in a war and die hundreds of miles from his home to preserve so that someone else can own another person? Not them particularly, someone else. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not the case, right? They were protecting their way of life, which for less than 1% of the population was slavery, sure. But for the vast majority, it had nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that whatsoever. Um, Ron Helton says, "Isn't it obvious the Second War for Freedom started in the very heart from where the First Revolutionary War started?" First Revolutionary War, though. Wait, what? Didn't that start? That started over by Boston, right? Nearby. Revolutionary War against a new oppressor. Exactly. Um, but it wasn't really a revolutionary war, right? Because they had created their own country, the Confederate States of America. Um, and they had done that before a shot was ever fired. Like a year and a half, I believe. About a year and a half before a shot was ever fired. Brother wouldn't have fought brother over slavery. Exactly, exactly. It was more about the what? Um, it was more about obviously states' rights, right? But self determination in general, right? Just not having this looming authority over you at all times. And that's what it really was. Getting rid of the tyranny of King George for a homegrown tyranny was more than those in the South could tolerate. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't fight a war just to replace one tyranny with another. You know. Um, but I've got to get back to this. Maligning the Confederate soldiers. Just calling them, oh, they're racist and they're pro-slavery and uh, all this other nonsense that people say about them. I mean, were they racist? Sure. Everyone and their mother at that time, though, was, at least by today's standards, they were. You know, all of them were. Even people who fought for the Union weren't fighting to abolish slavery. That's another ridiculous misconception. Um, yeah, didn't happen. They were just fighting to maintain the Union because they needed the South's crops in order to, in order to be a great economic power. They needed the South's crops. Otherwise, their economy would falter as well. Would probably just fail. Uh, so they absolutely needed the Southern states. So this idea again that slavery was the main central point is absolutely false in every way. Um, but yeah, like I said though, to you know, I keep going back to this, but yeah, just to call them, it won't let me use echo quotes. Really? Are you serious? Isaac Golet, how you doing? I haven't seen you before. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, Here, let me just go back to that so you can see me again. But yeah, so I guess I would just kind of had the thought about I guess revising history and minimizing the impact that this had on the South and basically just almost denying the courage and the valor and overall the sacrifice that those men died. Those men, gave their lives for. Uh, by just saying that it's about slavery, I mean, that makes obviously the cause is unjust at that point. And so I guess all that propaganda started during Restoration, the Restoration era afterwards. I guess probably to discourage people from trying again. You know, later on, you say a small percentage of citizens owned slaves. Yeah, they did. It was less than 1%. Less than 1%. The loss of the Second Revolution threw everybody in the clutches of a strong central tyranny. Destruction of real money with the Fed has kept everyone enslaved. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's 100% true. Um, Clutches of strong central tyranny. Yeah, that's when the federal government really started to gain power without even trying to hide it, without even giving a shit about the Constitution. But yeah, I guess I just kind of hmm, I kind of felt this like swelling of pride earlier today, listening to exactly what I'm listening to now. Being a South Carolinian from Charleston, no less, where it started. In fact, I grew up like 10 miles from where the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. Um, which actually an interesting fact. The first shot was fired by an artillery team from the Citadel. The Citadel is a military college in Charleston, South Carolina. So it was fired by cadets and not actual, you know, military members. So I thought that was kind of cool. Um, but yeah, so let's see. What else do I have here? I actually have a Huffington Post article that talks about how it wasn't about slavery. I thought that was pretty interesting. Let me see the date on it. 2011. That makes sense. Okay, so that was before they became a completely lefty rag. But that's why I pulled that article up. I thought it was interesting that they would say that, but it makes more sense if they said it, you know, whatever 9 years ago. Hmm. Let's see. What else do I have here? What else do I have here? Well, you know what? I'll put this article in the chat so you guys can read it. Ah, shit. And Pixterino. There we go. Yeah, so check that article out, guys, because it's pretty interesting. That the Huffington Post, right? Exactly. Um, it's pretty interesting read. Before 2011 is before corporations pretended to care about political correctness. Yeah, that's obvious. It must be. Uh, John, what do you think was the chief cause of the Civil War? Lack of autonomy for the states, lack of enforcement of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, which I think is going to be. The election of Abraham Lincoln didn't help. That was more of a catalyst than it was like a. I guess catalyst is kind of a cause, but I mean it was basically the feather that broke or the straw that broke the camel's back is really what the election of Abraham Lincoln was. Um, and that was mainly due to his. He didn't really have like anti slavery views. He just didn't want more slave states joining the union. So like because they would get too powerful. That's the main reason. Due to the electoral college and the three-fifths compromise, they would be receiving a lot larger population, a lot larger amount of delegates. The electoral college. So the slave states would have got more powerful, at least politically, and that was a problem for a lot of states. Which I mean, I can see their point. You don't want states just becoming powerful because they, you know, have slavery. So obviously that's one good reason, but it's one good reason to at least oppose adding more slave states into the union. Obviously, the best reason is that slavery is immoral, so and reprehensible and abhorrent. But thinking like at that time, thinking from the perspective at that time, it wasn't the fact that slavery was legal. That was almost a non-issue. You know, tariffs on cotton. The South shipped most of the cotton to Europe and England for more money. Hence the slogan "Cotton is king." Yeah, and absolutely. Um, but the funny thing is, the whole thing could have been avoided if the Union hadn't blockaded Charleston Harbor. Maybe it would have been delayed. I guess it wouldn't have happened when it did. But yeah, once they blockaded Charleston Harbor, that was it. They were pissed because they'd already created their own nation. So to blockade their harbor is an act of war. So when people say, oh, the South started the war, I mean that's technically true because they fired the first shots. But it's not like there wasn't already warlike aggression on the side of the Union beforehand. They didn't just decide, oh, we're just gonna fire on random ships going by. you know, there was reason. There was reason behind it. Why it says the Lincoln statue should be removed. Yeah, I mean he wasn't free to join the Union, free to leave. 100% I agree with you. Um, to this day, I would agree with that. If a state doesn't want to be part of the union anymore, fine, but you don't get any of the protections. You're treated as a foreign nation. I would be totally fine with that. Southern states didn't feel represented in government. The election of Abraham Lincoln was the final illustration that federal government would suffer no constitution. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Uh, but I do think that the main chief cause was a difference in interpretation of the Constitution, of the 10th Amendment specifically. So, just trying to follow the logic, you say, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, Lincoln was a mass murderer, yet in school we were brainwashed to think he was a great person. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I even got told the propaganda lie that was around in his time, when he was campaigning, about how he, was working as a clerk or something. Okay, Cameron, why don't you give me some evidence for that, other than just like a declarative statement? Um, but what was this? Oh yeah, the Abraham Lincoln propaganda. So, uh, yeah, where he was a clerk and someone had given him too much money, like he messed up the calculation, when he was trying to figure out how much to charge and how much change to give back, that he hadn't given back enough change, and so he went, tracked her down and, gave her back the extra like 2 pennies or whatever it was. So he's honest Abe, you can trust him and all that kind of crap. Which was completely untrue. It was just a story that was told during his campaign. Over 600,000 Americans died because Lincoln was against freedom. Yeah, absolutely. Any discussion by the seceding states, it's seceding, not succeeding, but okay, on states' rights refer to the states' rights to maintain the institution of slavery. They referred to it, yes, but that wasn't like we're seceding because you're not going to let us maintain. Um, we're not going to let you maintain slavery because that's not true at all. There was no effort to abolish slavery from the Union at that point. In contrast to the post-war efforts to downplay the importance of slavery, it dominated the thinking and the rhetoric of Southern statesmen in 1860-61. Are you just copying and pasting this? Deep South states, yeah, you are. Deep South states sent commissioners to the Upper South states to persuade them to leave the Union. The arguments emphasize the mortal danger that the recent election of Abraham Lincoln posed to slavery and to white people in the South. Oh my God, will you calm down, Cameron? It was a sub point. Exactly, it was a sub point. The arguments emphasized. Oh yeah, I already read that. The formal explanations that several states issued to justify secession similarly emphasized slavery. Mississippi Independence Declaration. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, which of course you don't finish the quote, right? The greatest material interest of the world, its labor supplies, the products. These products are peculiar to the climate verging on. Yeah, what is all this? Where are you copying, pasting this from? Florida Independence Declaration. What must be the condition of the slaves themselves when their numbers become so large that their labor will be of no value to their owners? Procure substance. What? Can anything be more impudently false than the pretense that this state of things can be brought about from the considerations of humanity to the slaves? Okay, so I I get that you copy paste this from somewhere, but wait, oh God, you're still going? Servitude of the American to the white race within her limits. So you're just kind of like cherry picking. I got it. Okay, you're cherry picking things that mention slavery, and not like the overall context of what they're saying. Because yes, obviously they were not going to free the slaves, but it's not like the Union had decided, hey guys, we're gonna free all the slaves, and the South was like, no, war. Like that's not at all how that happened. Because that's kind of the case that you're making with all this copy paste there, Cameron. Because you know that the only thing that had to do with slavery was creation of new states were not allowed to be slave states. Racism played a major part in Southern politics' attitude towards slavery. Racism was unanimous back then. It was. everyone was a racist back then, at least by today's standards. I mean, that word didn't even come about until what, the early 1900s, maybe later. Oh my God, you're still going. How about this, Cameron? Why don't you give it to me in your own words instead of just copy and pasting? Because I can't read all. I mean, it's boring if I just read all of this. It's boring for the people watching if I just read everything that you're copy and pasting right now. Yeah, from Wikipedia. Figures, yeah. No. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted. Okay, why don't you talk about the context rather than just like direct quotes? Because here, I'll give you a direct quote. If I could win this war without freeing a single slave, I would do it. Abraham Lincoln. Right? But you know what I failed to do? I failed to give the context. I didn't finish the quote, much like the things that you're writing down here, or that you're copy and pasting here, right? Because that's not the whole quote. The whole quote would be, obviously the first part, if I could end this war without freeing any slaves, I would do it. If I could win this war by freeing all the slaves, I would do it, right? The context being he wants to end the war by any means necessary, right? So I didn't give without giving context. I'd just say Abraham Lincoln said, I wouldn't. If I could end this war without freeing any slaves, I would do it. You see what I'm saying with that? Like you can provide quotes all you want without context to make it sound like you're making a point, but you're not. Your display of constant historical negationism is alarmingly similar to that of Lost Cause Southerners who exhibit an understanding of race that favors segregation and supports white supremacy. Why do you say that? Why do you say that, Cameron? Because I don't support segregation or quote unquote white supremacy, whatever your definition of that might be. But I certainly don't support either of those things. At least not forced segregation. Obviously I support your own choice. If you don't want to hang out with people that don't look like you, then that's your business. But yeah, I certainly don't support forced segregation or white supremacy. Now this major point: if slavery was bad, then why didn't the North pass legislation to abolish it before attacking the South? Remove the mote from your own eye. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the Constitution. Well, the Constitution should not have allowed for slavery. It's pretty clear in there that there shouldn't be slaves. It doesn't say it outright, obviously, but it's pretty clear that all men are created equal, and that the rights therein are uh, universal. So yeah, it really was more about from the when the drafting of the Constitution, when they kind of kicked the can down the road about slavery because they were arguing so much about it that they just kind of kicked the can down the road, and it turned into a bloody ass civil war. But yeah, I'm not a quote unquote lost cause Southerner, and I don't favor segregation, and I don't support white supremacy. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure where you're getting that from of historical negationism. Is that even like a real word? I don't know. But no, I mean, I'm looking for more than just the Wikipedia article to be copy and pasted in the chat. You know. Then you have an argument from authority here. Civil War historians James McPherson, David Blight, Shelby Foote, and Eric Foner all agree that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. Um, kick the can down the road, just like the current financial mismanagement. Oh yeah, Um, I mean, not that I would want this, but it is kind of one of the problems with a 4 year term limit for president. Um, I guess that's why you don't have a term limit though for Congress. Because yeah, I mean, you can just kind of kick the can down the road and let the next guy deal with it, and then he does the same thing. Let the next guy deal with it. You know what Cameron is referring to, and John does not adhere to it. Yeah, I don't. Like, I don't adhere to any of those three things that you mentioned. I don't know. What I'm for is, states' rights, uh, enforcement of the Constitution. Those sorts of things. At least the founders had the decency to list their grievances before declaring war on King George for their liberty. Yeah, that's true. Pretty sure they sent him a memo about it. Pretty sure they sent him a memo about their grievances. They were like, "Hey, man, you know," and then some kind of declaration after that, something like that. Yeah. So, see, if I ask you, you're just gonna start copy and pasting again. Tell me in your own words, Cameron, why would the South have seceded if it was just about maintaining the institution of slavery? Because the institution of slavery in the South was not at threat at all at that time. So, yeah, why would they have bothered to secede? Because if that was it, if that was the only grievance they had, then they could have just stayed and been like, okay, well, we don't care what happens over there. We don't care about any of this other shit. As long as we has our slaves, like that's such a fucking simplistic and narrow-minded view of events. Right. And also, all these songs that we're listening to right now, not one of them mentions slavery as a reason why they're fighting. Not one of them. Now, obviously, they're propaganda songs and they're marching songs or whatever. But you would think that if that was such a big, if that was such a big reason, then why wouldn't their songs be about it? I don't know. Maybe we're just not allowed to hear them anymore. Maybe there. I'm sure there were actually. I'm sure there were songs about that. But as you said already, wars are over many issues, not just one. Yeah, of course. I mean, no one goes to war because they have one grievance with somebody. You know what I mean? I don't know. You still there, Kim? Trying to find more sources. I mean, we've had this discussion in person plenty of times, Cameron, and I don't. Um, obviously you're entitled to your opinion as well as I am, and I don't, uh, you know, I don't wish you any kind of ill will or anything like that. Um, I don't mean to come off as like an asshole because like we're friends in real life. And you're obviously one of my best friends too. We just disagree on this thing, so and we've had way more contentious arguments. It is more difficult when you're in when you're in text form versus me being able to just speak freely. It is totally different dynamic. Um, so we obviously neither of us we're not going to agree with each other on this, um, and that's fine, you know. But I just obviously I respectfully disagree. Um, the North showed that they really did not give a damn about slavery. At the end of the Civil War, they did not provide assistance to the free slaves, which is why there was a civil rights movement. Right, exactly. I mean, dude, the North did not give a shit. I mean, they like again, they were not fighting to abolish slavery. They were fighting to maintain the Union, maintain the economy, especially. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, most people in the North didn't even care about slavery either. You know, it's like, oh yeah, we don't do that here, but you know, whatever. I mean, and they were also horrible to the freed slaves that were in the North. You know, the when they were free there, they were absolutely terrible to them. I don't know. They still had, you know, segregation and all this other nonsense that we wouldn't put up with today. I mean, just like so, like just the idea that there's this black and white, no pun intended, I guess, um, you know, version of history where the North is just completely good and moral, upstanding, you know, fighting for justice and you know the right, just doing the right thing, and the South is just completely evil and you know hates everyone who's not them and uh, you know could never do anything morally good. It's just that's absolutely fucking ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, first of all, in a war, there are no good guys in a war ever. No one's ever completely moral during a war. Everyone commits atrocities. Everyone. Preserving the Union is much like today's IRS scare tactics to keep all the tax slaves on the plantation. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, you're gonna comply or else. 100%. See, I'm curious about this. Exhibit an understanding of race that favors segregation and supports white supremacy. That's just so interesting. Because you know me personally, Cameron. That's why I'm very surprised that you would say something like that. Because you know that I don't. You know I'm not like that. So I don't even know if you're still here. But, yeah. Direct taxes were considered a vile evil by the founders. Direct taxes neuters the ability of people to properly protest the actions of the government. Yeah, yeah, 100% it is. The cities of the north attracted all kinds of people who didn't own land and voted themselves more power. Yeah, I mean, just kind of like today, you know. You know, we're doing that today. Whereas in the South, it was more, uh, you know, more constitutionalist. There was a threat to the balance of power in the states among citizens. Yeah, I mean, 100%, dude. Woodchuck. Lincoln was one of the first to employ unfounded fear tactics in his speeches. Yeah? Imagine how hard it would be for the government to make constant war if we were able to completely cut off all their funding and ability to print fiat money. Beautiful. Yeah, that would be fantastic. That's why I'm saying, dude, crowdfund the government. You know, crowdfund. If there has to be a government, you know, you should be able to give money to the cause that you want to support. Um, if that would be war, then so be it. You know, if they gain enough money to, you know, commit war, then so be it. If they don't, then they don't. Same with anything. You know, you wanna create a new road, you wanna create a new interstate system. Hopefully, other people see the value of it. That would be the best of all possible worlds, right there. Absolutely. Let's see. What else do I have? I think that's about it. As far as like the things I wanted to talk about, mainly it was about like um, the personal reasons that soldiers would fight for the Confederacy. John, you could never do that for reasons I'm not allowed to share here. I don't think that it would happen. I'm just saying that hypothetically, that would be the best case scenario. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that it's actually going to be a reality. I know you'd be happy to go into detail, midget. I know. But yeah, no, I mean, I mainly wanted to just come on here and discuss, yeah, like I said, personal reasons that soldiers would fight for the Confederacy. And I mean, first of all, there's a reason why they called it the War of Northern Aggression at the time. And It was because of the blockade of Charleston Harbor, um, just all the different things that the North was doing at the time that just kind of broke them. Just said, you know what, you know, we need to actually have a war about this, and it would have been good if I guess if they hadn't, obviously they hadn't gone into Northern Territory. They needed to win the war, but if they fought more of a defensive war, I think they would have maybe not won, but they certainly would have done better. Maybe caused a stalemate and a war of attrition, I suppose. Um, no, a war of attrition. I'm thinking out loud. Hence the name of the stream. Thinking out loud about it at the moment, though. A war of attrition would not have actually been probably good for the Confederacy, um, mainly due to the North having way more numbers. Uh, which, by the way, if you support the North and you support conscription, they did it from the beginning. Now, the Confederacy did do it later on because they ran out of volunteers. To be fair, to be 100% fair, they did do it. Gettysburg was a bad defeat. Yeah, dude, that goes to show it was all about miscommunication too. I'll get into that in a moment. Um, I suppose a defensive war would have been better though. They tried to go on the aggro. Yeah, dude, a defensive war would have been better, just to make it not worth attacking the South. Because if you set up fortresses, obviously, hindsight's 2020. I'm Monday morning quarterbacking, here, but uh, they built fortresses along the border, along the Mason Dixon line, and just held that spot and not let the North, in, or if they did, let them get so far in and take out their supply lines so that the army stranded would have been a much better strategy than what they did. Um, obviously, hindsight again, 2020, and uh, it, I don't know. Obviously, everyone did the best they could at the time. Gettysburg was a bad defeat. Well, that's yeah, 100%. Look at I was going back to the miscommunication there um, with Pickett's charge. That order wasn't really given. It was implied, or it was more inferred than it was implied. Um, and yeah, it just wasn't. Obviously, wasn't the right move to make. Again, hindsight being 2020, they did the like I said they did the best they could with what they had, but they could have won Gettysburg. It was a toss up until then. But yeah, I think I'm pretty close to ending it though, because that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Was just uh, valuing the sacrifice that people made at the time for doing what they thought was right. I can't imagine that the regular everyday Joe wanted to preserve slavery, even though they owned no land and owned no slaves and had no stake in it really. Um, that was more of a leadership thing, more of a you know government thing once they seceded. Um, and that's what kind of Cameron was talking about. And I'll get to the chat in a moment. I keep letting you guys distract me from my points and making me sound like I'm scatterbrained, which I am, but try not to sound that way. Um, anyway, see, I let you guys do it again. Oh yeah. I was talking about the once the government once the South seceded, they formed their own government, and sure, they might have been. That's what Cameron was talking about when it talked about like the different documents and leaders. You know, talking about maintaining the institution of slavery. Um, fair enough. A lot of that is propaganda, and not that it's modern propaganda. I'm talking about propaganda at the time saying, "Look, these people are going to take the slaves away. We need to maintain that." And that convinces other people with money, and that's the main thing, right? It all comes back to money. Uh, you know, to support the secession, to support a war. People. It's to scare the people who own slaves into thinking that their slaves were going to be gone if they didn't secede. So that's the main reason why that was there. It's not like the main reason for having the war. It was just a way of keeping people on their side, if anything. Let me go back to the chat here. Hole up in South Carolina. Hole up in South Carolina and let them good old boys in the Appalachians take care of any cheeky Yanks. Um, I mean, so while yeah, I wouldn't want to fuck with somebody in the Appalachian Mountains. Those are some hardy ass, badass motherfuckers. But I don't think that they have the numbers um, to deal with a northern army, um, marching through. If anything, numbers like that, and probably the way that they would fight, because they wouldn't fight as a unit like that. Like you're thinking, they would fight like family, like as families. It's like, oh, me and my five sons are gonna go and uh, if anything, you would want to like harass supply lines and things like that as Appalachian Shore, and that could have a huge impact on the readiness of the army. But I don't think they can actually defeat the army that's coming through. Um, I don't think turtling is the right thing. At least not like deep within your own. You don't want to turtle deep within your own territory. You want to turtle along along the border there. It says a lot about the Woodchuck says a lot about the mindset of the leaders though. South was defending themselves, whereas the North was imposing its will on others. Yeah, 100%, exactly, exactly. But people don't people are not allowed to see it like that, and that's a big problem. As soon as you see it like that, well, you're pro-slavery and you're racist and you want segregation and white supremacy and all this other nonsense that people will say. Um, yeah, but that's really what it is. South was defending themselves because they were aggressed upon, right? The North violated the non-aggression principle, and they liked it got dealt with, but they didn't. I don't know. I mean, I guess it was certainly a Pyrrhic victory from the North perspective because they lost. I mean, the numbers were almost even on how many men were lost, like overall. The numbers are almost even. It's just strategic victories in battles. It turns the tide. Uh, Robert E. Lee thoughts as a commander. Um, Obviously, I mean, even his contemporaries all agree that he was an excellent, excellent commander. The North especially had a great respect for him. Which, of course, as a military commander or a fighter of any kind of warrior or fighter or soldier, whatever, um, you're gonna respect someone who is very skilled, very knowledgeable. You're gonna respect them. Doesn't mean that you agree with them. Doesn't mean you like them. But you're gonna respect them. So Robert E. Lee certainly earned a lot of respect, and I think he's still. I mean, there's a reason why we say his name still. Um, even if you're, uh, even if you're like completely 100% against him, he's racist and he's all this whatever other nonsense, white supremacy, whatever other nonsense. Um, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, he actually had a chance to join the Union as a general. He got an offer from each side and chose Virginia over the country, which is respectable in its own thing, in its own way, because he chose his home over the nation, which of course says about his values, right? That he'd much rather protect his home than maintain the Union. So yes, Robert E. Lee, amazing commander, um, one of the best this nation has ever seen. Even though he fought for the quote unquote wrong side. Uh, Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely amazing as a commander. I don't know how he was as a person. I'm sure he was fine, but as a military commander, he was absolutely genius. Pickett's charge was the turning point of the war. Taking the fight to northern soil was a dumb move. Yeah, 100% accurate. It was a political decision, says Midget B. I'm not sure what exactly that's referring to, but I probably agree. It would have been easier to get the North to cease hostilities if the South stayed in their territory and employed guerrilla tactics to wear down the armies of the North. Exactly. There's problems with that, and problem with guerrilla tactics when you're fighting shoulder to shoulder, mainly most of the time, is mostly that of communication. It's really difficult to communicate. Obviously you don't have modern technology. You don't have radios, walkie talkies, whatever. Um, Maybe a more decentralized military would have helped, or so more trust in the officers, like the lower level officers, lieutenants, things like that, could have helped. Um, yeah, that probably would have helped out a lot because then you can have small unit tactics, where guerrilla tactics basically, um, where you just kind of trust the officers to go and do their job, which is to win the war, and they decide how they do that, for themselves. But then when it comes to like like the actual battle, like when the battle comes, skirmishes are done, uh, whatever. When it comes to the actual battle, you'd have to make sure everyone is there, and that would be difficult to do. They needed a win on the world stage. Yeah, and they almost got it, dude. They almost got France to come in, like intervene in the war on the side of the Confederacy, which is when the Emancipation Proclamation came about. It was purely a political move. He couldn't give a shit less about slaves, as we've already mentioned before. Abraham Lincoln, of course. Um, yeah, it's just it was purely a political move to stop France from entering the war. Um, Wyatt says thinking of basing one of my characters off of him. Really? Uh, some kind of general, I assume. And in what way? Basing him like what aspect of Robert E. Lee would you be basing a character off of? I'm just curious. But yeah, going back to the main point. So I guess to kind of summarize what I've said here, you know, Civil War was not chiefly about slavery. That was a slight issue. That was a sub issue, like a subset of issues to the broader issue of uh, federal government power and imposing its will on every other state. So the lack of the enforcement of the 10th Amendment and the different interpretation of the 10th Amendment in Article 6 of the Constitution. Um, so yeah, not chiefly about slavery. That was mostly decided afterwards. But the issue of slavery was brought up in order to convince the landowners who did own slaves that their way of life was at risk. Meanwhile, obviously, the ordinary Southerner's life was actually at risk. Um, okay. Let's see. Obviously, what people think of the Confederate flag was not the Confederate flag; it was a battle flag. Um, so to say that that represents slavery is absolutely false. It represents the spirit of rebellion, something that is almost uniquely American. Um, Not just rebellion, but like self determination, liberty, and of course rebelling against authority. as often as possible. Those are things that are almost uniquely American, and that's why I'm saying those people are more American than the North was, because they were giving up their values in order for the federal government to have more power. Let's see why it says war tactics and strategies. Someone that has respect of the army but may not be too good of a guy. Yeah, fair enough. Um, I honestly don't. I mean, I know that obviously the people in the army loved him. The politicians loved Robert E. Lee. It's just I don't know what the average person would have thought at that time of him. I'm sure they had respect for him too. I mean, everyone respected him. I just don't know how he like treated people. I haven't actually like read. I'm pretty sure he has like a memoirs or some kind of like a diary or something that's been published. I'm pretty sure that exists, but I haven't read it yet. I probably should. But but yeah. Um, anyway, yeah. What I don't appreciate the fact that people malign the old Dixie is what the flag's called. What they think is the Confederate flag. I don't appreciate that being maligned because again, it doesn't represent slavery. It doesn't represent racism, right? It represents the American spirit, is what it is. It represents fighting for what you believe in. It represents the sacrifice that you give. It represents the cost of liberty. It represents watering the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants. And patriots. So that's kind of the synopsis of what the point of this stream was. Even though I don't think I articulated it very well at the beginning. Um, but that's basically the point. Those are the points I want to get across. So, is there anything else? Anything else the chat wants to talk about? Anything else you guys want to discuss? Which I guess is the same thing. Um, yeah, like I said, this is kind of an impromptu stream. Uh, and I did try and figure out how to screen share. I'm just having a huge problem figuring it out. I've watched a bunch of videos. For some, I don't know what it is about my. I think it's my laptop. There's some setting or something that I have turned on somewhere that's not letting me do it. Because every video I've watched, it's like, oh yeah, you just do this, do this, do this, do this, and then it works. And I would do exactly the same thing, it just wouldn't work. So I don't know. I'll continue to try and figure it out because I would much rather be able to share my screen with you guys than just have my big dumb face up here, just talking at you. But yeah, if there's nothing else, then I'll go ahead and end the stream in a moment. Um, but yeah, like so basically, I guess the takeaway from this is if someone says something about any historical event, even if it's not the Civil War, but that's probably one of the most contentious. But if it's not the Civil War, even if it's not the Civil War, learn about history. Um, and so, of course, any source is going to have its bias. Any source will have its bias. That's why you need to see both, you know, the uh, or as many sides, I guess, or as many perspectives of the events as you can, and come to your own conclusion. That's the main takeaway, I think. What I'm trying to do. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream, and yeah, I will see you guys next time. Hopefully, I'll be streaming soon. I might stream tomorrow, depends on if I work or not. We'll see what happens. See you guys.